I have been dating my boyfriend online for 3 years, and the hardest days are when I accompany him a little bit. Once he appeared, his lover turned against him, for no other reason. The person who has been with me for 3 years is also an accomplice to bullying me. Afterward, Abner Shelley gave back to himself what he had done to me. He begged me to forgive him, and begged me to turn back. But in this world, how can it be paid off once it is reported? When Abner Shelley led someone to block me in the corner, I was sending a message to the top of Weshit, Abner Shelley baby, there's something to do tonight, I'll play the game with you later. The dim streetlights poured down, casting only a patch of light around the corner. As the message was sent, I clenched my fists, but when I looked up, I heard a message tone. In the next second, through the gap in the crowd, I saw Abner Shelley leaning against the wall. His eyes fell on his mobile phone. The coldness between his eyebrows and eyes instantly melted, and the smile in the corners of his eyes was gentle. He leaned close to the radio hole of his mobile phone, and his voice was low and gentle. It's okay, I happen to have something to do. Just look for me when you're done. The person in front of him consciously fell silent. The phone in my hand vibrated, and I lowered my eyes just in time to see a voice message from Abner Shelley baby. You're in luck. Apologize. Abner Shelley put away his phone, and his gaze became cold and unforgiving again. I'll let you go, Abner Shelley. The woman standing beside him shouted dissatisfiedly. Abner Shelley ignored her, holding a cigarette in his hand, and the person next to him tried to hand over the fire, but he didn't. The eyebrows and eyes of the person in front of me coincide with previous photos. Abner Shelley stood at the outermost point, the light illuminating only half of his face, bright and dark, but still too good-looking. I'm in a trance. Half is my Abner Shelley, half is Abner Shelley. The force in his hand was released. I shook my head. Okay. Abner Shelley didn't look at me again, just exchanged a look. Punches and kicks kept falling on me, one after another. The place where it was touched hurts. Threats, invectives, word by sentence got into my ears, and Odelia Roy's smug laughter. I buried my face in the crook of my arm. I don't know how long, but when I opened my eyes again, the figure around the corner was long gone. I provoked Odelia Roy. It's not been a day or two since she's been annoying, relying on the fact that she has a gangster boyfriend who is in school. On Wednesday I was in line at the cafeteria to eat. She suddenly appeared with her little sister, and without greeting her, she stepped into the line as if no one was around, blocking in front of me. If it was a normal day, I might have spoken to her first, but I was so hungry that day. I forgot to eat breakfast in the morning, and I was hungry in the third class. Directly pushed her, but I forgot that I had a lot of strength. This push directly pushed her to the ground. The sound of Odelia Roy landing was not small, and even the piece suddenly fell silent. All eyes are on us. She probably had never been treated like this before, and her face was blood red, like a red balloon that was overinflated and about to explode. I was just about to apologize to her when I heard my aunt call me. What is the girl eating? Don't be sluggish. There are still people in the back. I was stunned for a moment, forgetting that Odelia Roy was still on the ground, and reported the names of a few dishes to my aunt. By the time I finished eating, she was gone. I thought about it and felt that she was at fault first, and the two of us wrote it off. It's just that I think Odelia Roy apparently doesn't think so. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked her boyfriend's best brother to teach me a lesson. I won't be beaten up by my boyfriend. When I went back to my dormitory, my clothes were soaked in sewage, dirty and smelly. The roommate covered his nose and looked surprised. Cora Milne, what's wrong with you? I accidentally fell on the road. Oh, she breathed a sigh of relief. Let's go take a shower. I answered, took off the mask on my face, and the phone in my pocket vibrated again. What are you doing? Are you done? Why ignore me? JPG. Obedient. Wait, well, JPG. I didn't reply. pressed the screen off button, and went into the bathroom. Abner Shelley and I have been dating online for 3 years and haven't met each other yet. When we first met, he called me Cora Milne. Later, when I got acquainted, he called me Cora. Later, he confessed to me and called me obedient. We've known each other for almost 3 years. Halfway through, his grandfather died. During that time, we talked on the phone 5 times a day, and he was there talking about his grandfather, and he was hoarse or crying. I cried with him here, comforting him while crying. I knew his childhood well, and I listened to him talk about the young years that he couldn't go back to, the only years he missed. My browser search history is all about how to comfort a loved one when he has passed away. He sometimes called me in the middle of the night. At 3 o'clock in the morning the city was dark, and I was woken up by the sound of a bell in my sleep, sat up from my bed, looked at the night like ink, and wept with him. Later, Abner Shelley slowly walked out, and time proved that the best consolation was indeed companionship. Although we never met, I'll be there when he needs me, he said. Good thing. I'm glad you're here. When she received this message, her best friend Gladys Salome happened to see it next to her, and she sneered, "I can't see that you're so idle, comforting a stranger you don't know through the screen." I stared down at the screen and replied, "Amazing, isn't it? The internet is really developed." Abner Shelley's avatar is a cat, smiling softly at me. Just looking at it, it also makes me feel better. It can turn 2 people who have never met into an intimate relationship in the worldly sense. The company of the screen can also be the salvation of others. Tap your finger on the next line of words on the screen and tap send. I will accompany you. What to say? I looked at Gladys Salome and smiled. Is that the greatness of love? The sound of water in the bathroom stopped abruptly. I wrapped myself in a bath towel, and when I came out, my roommate pointed to the phone on the table. "Cora Milne, your boyfriend made a few phone calls, and I said you went to take a shower." "Thank you," I said softly. Her gaze touched my arm, and she exclaimed again, "How did you fall? Why is it so bad?" "It just so happens that I have a bottle of bruising medicine. You come over and I'll rub it for you." The pain spread over the bruise, and I bit my lip to keep myself from speaking. The pungent smell of medicine filled the small space, and I typed Abner Shelley back. "I'm done." A meme popped up over there, as if it had been waiting for me to reply. Kiss JPG. "Do you still play games at night?" I thought about it and replied, "No fight. I'm today." "What's wrong today?" My eyes flashed and I continued typing. "I met a guy cutting in line today, so I pushed him, and he said that he was going to find someone to teach me a lesson." The person on the other side jumped in the input, and finally the other person was talking. The voice box jumped out one by one. I didn't click on it, just replied, "It's okay, he didn't come to me." "Is it reasonable for him to cut the line?" Abner Shelley asked. Voice frames kept popping up on the opposite side, long and short, with red dots. My eyes only fell on the text reply, and I couldn't hold back my laughter for a while. "What's wrong?" The roommate was confused. 2 physiological tears laughed out of the corners of my eyes, and I raised my hand to wipe them away. I saw a funny joke. Our chat never stopped for a day. Abner Shelley has sent me a lot of photos. There is the brilliant sunset in the evening. There are clusters of unknown flowers on the edge of the grass, and there is the blue to pure sky. There is also a picture of him standing in his garden, smiling at the camera. The corners of the white shirt are hooked by the wind. The young man is tall, Jilin Yushu, smiling like the moon in his arms. He said, "Oh my boy, this picture is for you to see. Maybe one day, you'll recognize me on the road." I said there is no such coincidence in the world. Now I find out I was wrong. There are more coincidental things in the world. The half-light and half-dark faces in the nightlight are delicate and indifferent. Beautiful facial features overlap with the person in the photo. Strange and familiar. Abner Shelley once asked me what kind of people I liked. I asked him, "What are you like?" He said, I am what you like. I said, I like the beautiful teenagers. That's what I imagined. My Abner Shelley. There was silence for a long time, and only a smile came back to me. The dialogue box on the other end of the screen keeps popping up. I was stunned for half a minute before I sent him a message. Abner Shelley. Do you want to meet? The next day in the cafeteria, I met Odelia Roy again. She continued to take shortcuts, and I stood in the middle of the other team, watching the boy who was cut in line swallow and say nothing. Odelia Roy turned to laugh with her little sister, her blood-red lips raised, and she caught a glimpse of me in the group. She thought of something. The corners of her mouth rose even more, and she pulled the little sister away from the group, squeezing straight into the middle between me and the person in front of her. With a shrug of my elbow, I almost pushed me down on the person behind me. I stumbled on my feet, and I managed to stabilize my body. The person in front of me turned his head with disdainful eyes, as if mocking my incompetence yesterday. It's rare for me to see such an ugly face. The corners of my lips were about to be bitten and bleed, and I tried my best to hold back the restlessness in my heart, lowering my eyes to hide all my emotions. Small, cheap, human. The three words were scolded word by word, and she was bitten sarcastically and ugly, but it couldn't have been clearer in my ears. My reason almost collapsed, and a fishy smell spread in my mouth at the corners of my mouth, and I swallowed it to death. The Weshit interface with Abner Shelley baby is stuck in a kiss emoji he sent me yesterday. Really, obediently. We're finally going to meet. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, and I've wanted to see you for a long time. Exactly. It's been almost 3 years. When I think of a good day, I'll tell you. Good. I'm so glad to finally see you. Maybe you won't like me when you meet. How could it be? I like my good boys. Kiss. JPG. The chat was interrupted here, and I finished my meal, sat in the cafeteria, and read this paragraph over and over again. It seems that I want to see something from it, but I can't see anything. Before I met Abner Shelley, I wasn't a gregarious kid. Can be called a friend? For so many years, there is only one Gladys Salome. Excluded, isolated, looked at like a monster. That's all I had in my childhood, but I didn't do anything wrong. The only person I was with during those years was Gladys Salome. I never learned to give in. Odelia Roy thought she had won. Abner Shelley hasn't been coming back to me since that night. The days seem to have calmed down. Beneath the calm surface of the sea lurks a restless whirlpool. I can't swallow this breath. Monday evening electives. The teacher is notoriously strict, and at the end of the semester, he not only has to take a closed book exam, but he is also stingy with his usual grades. Students who choose this course are either unlucky or genuinely eager to learn. As soon as the bell rang, the well-dressed middle-aged woman took the roster and began to roll call. I sat in my seat, listening to the string of names, and bowed my head to message Abner Shelley. Good girl. When is it? I can't wait. I really want to see you right away. I replied with a meme, and the teacher on stage happened to read my name, Cora Milne. I replied, raised my hand, and the teacher's gaze flashed across my face, and I bowed my head to write it down on my watch. No hurry. The shouting of names continued, and I unmistakably captured the familiar name. But when I looked sideways, it was a face that didn't match the name. The girl raised her hand and replied softly. The teacher looked over to her and nodded. My heart suddenly began to beat faster, like anticipation, like a warning. Teacher. An abrupt voice suddenly spread in the classroom, and the middle-aged woman's eyes were like torches, shooting straight at me. I got up, a gentle smile on my lips, and respectfully detonated a flat thunderbolt. She's not Odelia Roy. My eyes fell on the girl's somewhat flustered face, and my expression remained unchanged. I guess it's a substitute teacher. There was silence in the classroom. I know. My bond with Odelia Roy is getting bigger and bigger. Maybe other teachers are too lazy to care about substitute teaching, but I know that this teacher will pursue it, not only to be pursued. I reckon that Odelia Roy is going to pass this course, and it's all hanging. When he went to bed at night, Abner Shelley called in a voice that was hoarse and doting on people who could drown. "How's it going?" When he shouted to be obedient, the two words seemed to roll around from the sugar jar, and fell into the ears crispy and numb, which could make people blush. "Today, I'm glad to do it," I replied with a smile, with a bit of excitement in my tone. He seemed to be infected by me, and there was a little smile in his tone. "What did you do? It's fun to think we're going to meet soon." "I'm happy to." After 2 hours of chatting on my phone, I finally lay in bed and was about to fall asleep when I heard him ask, "How much longer?" "It's almost there," I said softly. Odelia Roy's revenge began 2 days after I revealed that she was looking for someone to substitute teach. She wanted to lock me up in the school building, and when I saw her, I ran away, and she couldn't catch up. Every day when I came out of the classroom, I put on my mask and pulled down my hat, carefully observing my surroundings and avoiding her. She didn't catch me, and she was angry for a few days. But life is not as expected, and things are often 8 or 9. On the 5th day, she and I met her in the cafeteria. I hit the meal I wanted to eat, and I was beaming with my bowl in my hand, trying to find an empty seat to sit down. The cafeteria was bustling with people, and I had sharp eyes, aimed at a spot, and happily walked there. There is a lot of noise in my ears. There are still 4 or 5 steps to go. The sticky, piping hot soup suddenly poured over my head, across my cheeks, and into my collar. There are quite a few, splashed in my rice bowl. I held the bowl and froze in place. The soup snaked down from the neck, like a small snake, and it was very itchy. My skin was a little sore from the soup, and I frowned, but I just stared at the rice contaminated with the soup. "It's a pity, I can't eat it." The cafeteria was so quiet that you could hear a pin dropping. The man standing in front of me is all too familiar. Odelia Roy and I, once again in the spotlight. The soup chicken looked very embarrassed, and I was tossed by her to the ground with dignity. But fortunately, the mask also helped me retain some of my self-esteem. The blazing gaze fell on me, stabbing me uncomfortably. I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure, sitting straight in the crowd of onlookers, and my eyes flashed. And then I fixed my eyes, but I could see the person across from him, Odelia Roy's boyfriend. "They're here to support Odelia Roy." "Little slut, you're playing tricks on me behind my back. Who gave you face?" "Heh." Odelia Roy was menacing. Her blood-red lips were closed one by one, like the apricots of a poisonous snake, and her spit flew in front of me, almost landing in my eyes. She continued to output, and the words in her mouth were worse than the rancid garbage in the sewers. My dignity was trampled under her feet, crushed little by little, and my boyfriend, he just sat there, help Odelia Roy and watch her violence with a cold eye. What a funny scene. A small arc rises at the corner of the lip under the mask. Embarrassed and embarrassed, Odelia Roy finished cursing and tried to rip off my mask and remove the last fig leaf from me. The bowl in my hand slammed to the ground, and I covered my face to avoid her movements. "How dare you hide, slut? I'm going to tear your face to shreds today." "No way. Masks are the only ones that don't." I was like the last struggling beast, desperately protecting the mask on my face. Everyone was watching coldly, and I knew they were the boyfriends of Abner Shelley and Odelia Roy, who were afraid to sit there. Odelia Roy couldn't reach me, so she was annoyed and slapped me in the face. There was still a palm wind, which was about to fall on my face, and the next second, someone grabbed her hand. Certainly not Abner Shelley. I shrank my head, didn't wait for the slap to fall on my face, and then opened my eyes, and the figure in the skirt stood in front of me. Odelia Roy's hand was tightly clenched by her, and in the flash of light, a crisp voice sounded, and the people around her gasped. Odelia Roy's face was slapped to the side. Abner Shelley turned his head, and his gaze fell on my face, a disdain for the garbage, and even unwilling to linger too long, and turned to the person in front of me. Odelia Roy's boyfriend tried to get up, but he held him down. Odelia Roy covered her face, her eyes vicious and resentful, but she didn't make any further moves. The man in front of me turned his head, his long curly hair falling down, his lips red, and his expression cold. I bit my lip and called her, Gladys Salome, Gladys Salome, the goddess of the temple. It's also me. I made friends when I was in elementary school, and it's hard to be a brother. Our school is divided into two campuses, north and south, and she and I are on different campuses, and I don't know how she came to my side today. I was led by her, almost as if she had dragged me back to my bedroom. The roommate didn't come back. She pushed me into the bathroom and didn't say a word to me again. The soup was half dry, and it was very uncomfortable to stick to me, and the afternoon temperature was high, and it smelled unpleasant. I turned on the shower. When I came out, I saw her sitting in my chair, leaning against the back of the chair and frowning. The waves scattered over her shoulders, and her lips matched the color of the rose. Your boyfriend messaged you. She heard my voice and pointed to the phone on my desk. If I'm not mistaken, his name is Abner Shelley, isn't he? Abner Shelley is also on the North Campus. Two of the heroes. Perhaps in reality, the two of them are more familiar. Her fingertips pinched the center of her eyebrows, and her face was as cold as ever. He's here today, right? What's going on? Isn't he your boyfriend? I didn't say a word. My eyes were fixed on my toes. Droplets of water ran down his hair and fell to the ground, blurring a stain of water. Her gaze turned to me, calm and inquiring. Not right away. I spoke suddenly, and raised my eyes to hers. Gladys Salome's eyes were as sharp and cold as usual. She looked at me quietly for a moment, and I let her look at me. After a long time, she got up and pinched my face with her fingers. If you have something to do with me, don't hold it back. Gladys Salome accompanied me to the north courtyard after dinner, and I sent her to the gate of the south courtyard. And instead of scanning the code and cycling, I slowly walked to the dormitory. There weren't many people on the road. The light of the street lamps shines on the path, and the shadows of mosquitoes are flying, and the wind rustles through the roadside trees. It's hard to feel good. Later, when I went to bed, I made an appointment with Abner Shelley to play games. There was footsteps behind me, squirming, and it seemed to be following me all the time. I quickened my pace, and the voices behind me picked up. Who's following me? Suddenly turned around, but there was no one behind him. The footsteps suddenly disappeared, and the figure on the road disappeared. Delusion. I felt a little uneasy, turning around and continuing to pick up the pace. He took out his phone, and wanted to call his roommate. There was a sudden pain in his hand, and with a bang, the phone hit the ground. I withdrew my hand in pain, and my arm was immediately clamped again, one left and one right, making people struggle. Pretty pointy black heels stomped on my phone and crushed it hard, the sound of glass shattering exploding on the quiet path. There are also small cracks in the heart. That phone, I bought it with my own money. After using it for 3 or 4 years, it is no longer very sensitive, and it was originally just a large memory. Over the years, I have saved a lot of things, and sometimes the mobile phone is stuck for half a day, and the battery is broken. I just repaired 2 or 3 times, but it carries too much, and I don't want to lose it. It contains memories of Abner Shelley and I for nearly 3 years. He poured out with a crying voice, sang songs for me in a hoarse voice, and a soft voice, when he coaxed me to sleep in the middle of the night, and bits and pieces, the traces of life he shared with me. Sometimes watching a little bit can make you happy all day long. There was still unresolved redness on half of her face, and the concealer and foundation could only cover part of it, which made Odelia Roy a little funny. I just glanced at her, then lowered my eyes and stared at the phone she was stepping on. Little slut. She walked up to me, the stiletto heels of her high heels clattering on the floor. Alone. Now that Gladys Salome is not by your side, who will protect you? Her voice was as sharp as a fingernail scratching a blackboard, piercing my eardrums. Little by little, all the nasty words poured into my ears again. Whore, sluts. I listened to her greet my parents, and the dirty words she spat out were not the same. Little slut, today I will let you know what happens if you mess with someone you shouldn't mess with. With a wave of her hand, Odelia Roy dragged me into the woods with two men beside her. They had a lot of strength, and their shoes made a clattering sound on the ground. I stubbornly didn't want to move, staring at the phone that had fallen not far away. The glass shell on the back has left a crack that looks like a spider's web. It was Odelia Roy's stiletto heel. The two people behind me exerted their strength, and their grip on my wrist hurt a little, and when they saw that I didn't move, they simply dragged me. The heel touched the grass, dragging and rubbing against the fine stones, the sharp stones cutting through one side of the ankle. It hurts a little. They threw me to the ground. I straightened up and looked at Odelia Roy with her hands crossed. The moonlight is bright tonight. Through the layers of leaves, I can also see the hideous and distorted faces of the people in front of me. The asymmetry of both sides of the face made me a little uncomfortable to watch. She lifted her foot, fast and hard, trying to step on me, and with a flick of her heel, I quickly turned sideways. Odelia Roy was annoyed. Pull her up. The man next to me immediately set me up as if I were an animal to be slaughtered. Odelia Roy pulled away a smile, her lips blood red, and the edges of her lips were still painted red. Under the moonlight, it is like a cursed doll painted unevenly in oil paint. Little slut. She lifted her leg, pointed her thin heel at my lower abdomen, grinned, and kicked it down. My hands were clamped, and I could only watch as the windy legs came at me. It's going to hurt, I think. By the time I got back to my dorm, the door was almost closed. The aunt downstairs was holding the lock, and my clothes were stained with mud and grass, and they were dirty. I whispered sorry to her as I entered. The aunt was very kind, and only said that it was okay. When I got back to my dorm, the roommate took the potato chips, and was chasing the show, and pressed pause when he heard the door open. Cora Milne, why is it so late? Why are your clothes dirty again? Another fall. I whispered to her that I didn't take off my mask. Are you all right? Her eyes widened. Why have you been wrestling lately? Did it hurt this time? I'll give you some more medicine. I shook my head. His arms hung down at his sides, and he was still a little weak. I slowly walked to the closet, picked up my clothes, and went into the bathroom. The warm water fell from the top of my head, and I felt alive. The bruises on the arms and thighs had not yet disappeared, which showed how ruthless the men led by Abner Shelley that day. There was still a slight pain when I pressed it, and I twisted it hard, and physiological tears poured out, and they were carried away by the running water. Fall into the sewer together. When he came out of the bathroom, Abner Shelley's phone rang. I clicked the connect button, and a hoarse voice came, and he seemed to have something to say to me. I put my phone aside and took the basin to do the laundry. The mud on the pants rippled in the clear water, polluting a basin of clear water. Abner Shelley told me that he saw a kitten on the side of the road today, and fed it a little ham sausage. The kittens are adorable. I rubbed my clothes hard. Good boy. Do you like cats or dogs? I was stunned for a moment before I said, dog. Okay, then we'll have a dog from now on. The strength of the hand was relaxed, and the basin of water slammed into the ground, cracking a hole, and the water rushed out of the crack, and flowed all over the ground. The sound was heard by Abner Shelley on the other end, who anxiously asked me what was wrong. It's fine. He breathed a sigh of relief. Gentle, kind, attentive, affectionate. It's the same character he showed me in the past. It's so good for stray animals. The person on the other end of the line was still talking about this, and I didn't listen to a word. The unspoken words were swallowed in my stomach. Abner Shelley. Where did we come from? Abner Shelley found me sooner than I thought. On the third night of my choking by Odelia Roy, I came out of the library. Someone was following me, walking to a place where there are fewer people. The sound of footsteps comes from far and near. I pulled my hat down, quickened my pace without a trace, and walked around the corner. My collar pulled from behind and brought back. The strength of my feet was unsteady, and I was pulled by him and fell to the grass on the side. But fortunately the soil was soft and not very painful. Abner Shelley let go and looked at me condescendingly. The street lamp overhead shone a dim glow, but he blocked behind him, and his whole face was in shadow. I felt a little uneasy about touching my mask. His gaze on me was not warm, and even a little impatient. Odelia Roy said she wanted you to apologize. Abner Shelley looked at me condescendingly, spitting out words without any emotion. I sat on the ground in a daze, staring at him in a daze, as if I didn't understand him. Abner Shelley's facial features are superior. The first time I saw his photo, I was amazed, like an angel left behind in the world. It's a cliché metaphor, but I have never seen a better person than him for this metaphor. He sent me that picture. The boy looked at the camera, and his eyebrows were gentle, but there is clearly a lingering faint coldness on the body. Gentleness is the mask he gave me. In front of me now is the real Abner Shelley. Obediently let her get angry. It's over. What are you going to provoke her to do? Abner Shelley's brow almost overflowed, and for the first time I saw him frown. Speak to me impatiently. A little bug that doesn't measure itself, I thought to myself. Now in his eyes, I am like this. It's not me who is wrong. The voice under the mask was hoarse and startled to me. I looked straight into Abner Shelley's eyes and straightened my back, trying to save the last bit of dignity. It was Odelia Roy who first. I don't care. Abner Shelley interrupted me suddenly, his expression indifferent. I don't care whose fault it is. You've made her lose face. She's not happy. The strength of the whole body was drained at once, and the unspoken words were annihilated in the throat. I stared at him. She wants you to apologize to her in front of the whole school on weekend nights. Abner Shelley glanced at his phone. His brow furrowed even tighter. Just say yes. I don't really want to do anything with girls. Apologize. I repeated his words, and it was kind of funny. How do you apologize? Sunday at 8 o'clock. The west playground of the school. Abner Shelley paused. Kneel down and apologize. Someone is passing around the corner. Their eyes fell on me, with a little pity, but the moment they saw Abner Shelley, their faces changed again, and they walked away quickly. Silence spreads in the night. I lowered my eyes. The sound of breathing was particularly clear in the quiet of the night. Quick. Okay. Abner Shelley paused. Don't play tricks. Something that can be solved by apologizing. Don't let it turn into a bigger. I know. I interrupted him. Sunday at 8 o'clock in the evening. West Playground. I'll go. We'll definitely go. The dormitory is closed. When I took out my phone again, I saw a few missed calls from my roommate. I sent her a message back and told her not to worry. There was something going on today and she wouldn't be going back to her dorm at night. She immediately replied to the emoji. Abner Shelley's new Weshit message popped up as soon as I exited my roommate's chat interface. Good girl. Why didn't you reply to me just now? Unspeakable emotions flooded my heart, and I typed the next line word by word. Abner Shelley. Let's meet. The Weshit phone on the other end immediately jumped out. I clicked on, and Abner Shelley's voice was filled with joy. Good. Really? We're going to meet. I'm still standing where I am, and there's no one on the road anymore. The moon was blocked into the clouds. The light of the street lamps was a little dim, and the night was silent. I heard the sound of his breath falling into my ear. I looked at the lamp and smiled. Yes. The tone was so sweet that it made me feel a little sick to my stomach. Abner Shelley. I want to see you. Gladys Salome opened the door for me just as I ended the call. Her eyes focused on the stain on my pants, and silently motioned for me to give her an explanation. A small accident, I said calmly. Accident, she repeated, speaking quickly and without emotion. What about this? The screen of my phone was pressed against my eyes. There is a screenshot hanging on it. Walls. Sunday at 8 p.m. West Playground. Please watch a good show. The words Odelia Roy hung brightly on it. A picture is also attached. It was supposed to be taken by Abner Shelley tonight. I wore a mask. My hat was pulled low, and I sat on the floor, looking embarrassed. The campus wall sent a separate message to Odelia Roy. The heat is high. There are a lot of comments below, but I don't dare to say it explicitly. Just a subtle hint of something. Cora Milne. Gladys Salome's face was as cold as ever. Tell me, what is this? It's... I ripped off my mask and smiled at her. The fox of the fox and the tiger. The morning sun was shining through the window lattice, and my biological clock prompted me to wake up early. Gladys Salome was still sleeping. I rubbed my eyes and saw the message from Abner Shelley 5 minutes ago. Good girl, I'm up. I'm looking forward to it. Kiss. JPG. I'm finally going to see my baby. I pressed the screen off button, put on my slippers and walked out of the room. The coat I wore yesterday hung on the balcony, blown by the wind. I took the hanger and went to get it. You're going to wear this dress to a date. I looked back and saw that Gladys Salome was already up, leaning against the balcony door with her hands up, and glaring at me. Nope. I took the garment and folded it. The jacket for the summer is thin enough to fit into my satchel without looking bulky. It's a surprise. The early morning breeze blows on the face, with a little coolness that has not yet dissipated. Gladys Salome's nightdress was lifted by the wind, and she had this paralyzed face since she was a child. She yawned, then turned back to her room. Call me if there's something. The time on the phone changed from 9:59 to 10 o'clock. The wind chimes in front of the bubble tea shop jingled, and I took out the mirror from my bag to make sure my makeup was in good shape. At the moment of the action, the glass window next to it was snapped. I put down the mirror and looked back, only to see the young man standing in the sun, the corner of his shirt blown by the wind, and a smile in his eyes. Good boys. Abner Shelley smiled. I couldn't make out his voice, but I could still make out the same pampering, as usual from the shape of his mouth. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the bubble tea shop quickly. The morning sun was just right, shining down to illuminate his delicate appearance, and there was the roar of cars on the side of the road. As if by magic, Abner Shelley pulled out a bouquet of flowers from behind his back, but the flowers in his arms are less than half of him. The moment he stood in front of him, the person in the picture seemed to be truly alive. A young man who is bright and windy. My, Abner Shelley. Abner Shelley reached out and wrapped the hair on my cheek behind my ear as if we had never been close. I could see the love in his eyes. I couldn't hide the joy in my voice. Finally met. Good girl. Oh, yes, finally met. Abner Shelley. Abner Shelley loves Cora Milne. How much do you like it? I loved it until he begged me over and over again, but was silent again because of my refusal. I like it that he once asked me if I like Chinese or Western wedding dresses. I like it. Obviously allergic to seafood, and I peel shrimp with a smile. At the beginning of the day, the roadside stalls are full of fireworks. I declined Abner Shelley's request to take me to an expensive restaurant, and dragged him to sit down at a roadside stall. Abner Shelley is a boy who is not used to the environment of a roadside stall, and I can see with the naked eye the stiffness of his seat. But the moment they met my eyes, my expression softened again. I took the menu and ordered with the boss, and Abner Shelley listened to me read it and said softly, Cora Milne, this kind of roadside stall is delicious, but it's not healthy. Let's come less in the future. Okay. I nodded. He smiled and rubbed my head, never taking his eyes off me for a moment. Abner Shelley rushed to pay for the day. From the beginning, stand carefully beside me and touch my hand, intentionally or unintentionally, until I grabbed his hand and dyed it pink. Then he interlocked his fingers with me all the way, as if he was afraid that I would run away. His heart is full of eyes. It's all me. Steaming barbecue and shrimp and crab were served. Each shrimp is soaked in soup and is bright in color and mouth-watering. I was about to get it when I was stopped by Abner Shelley. He took one from the bowl, somewhat awkwardly peeled the shell, and put it in my bowl. I was stunned for a moment. I'll peel it. You can eat it. I knew Abner Shelley had a cleanliness fetish, and I knew he was allergic to these things. I deliberately told my boss not to use gloves. Orange oil dripped down his hand and onto the table, and his long, white, art-like hand was stained with oil. Abner Shelley looked down at me, with tenderness in his eyes. There was a little me reflected in my eyes. Cora Milne, just take care of the food. For the rest of my life, I'll take care of you. The man in his eyes smiled, but did not answer. The night is getting darker. Abner Shelley went to the boss to settle the bill. I walked outside and stopped a car on the side of the road. I pulled the back seat away. The evening was windy, and I shivered. Abner Shelley happened to see him, and he hurriedly settled the account and left for me. I took my coat out of my bag, and put it on. In the evening, when the wind was blowing, Abner Shelley's hair was brought up, and the moon fell on him, along with the light of the street lamp. He ran towards me and brought the bouquet of flowers I had dropped on my chair. It's only 4 or 5 steps away. Suddenly, I said, don't come here. Abner Shelley's footsteps paused for a moment, his face puzzled, but he froze for the moment he met my eyes. Cora Milne. He cautiously called out my name. The wind is howling. The time on the phone jumps to 10 o'clock. It's as if Cinderella's clock is ringing, and all dreams disappear in an instant. But I'm not Cinderella. Abner Shelley was not a prince either. 12 hours. Met Abner Shelley 3 years ago. At that time, he was withdrawn, misanthropic, indifferent, and lacking love, and every conversation was carried with boredom with the status quo of life. I pretended not to know, and stayed with him, little by little, until he opened up. By now, he has grown into a gentleman. 3 years of calls, 3 years of companionship, 3 years of flowing time. Now it has come to an end. This is the end of Abner Shelley's dream. He put me in the plan. He always thought we had a future. He painted me many, many futures. Unfortunately, we can't have a future. The moonlight is cool and thin. I pulled the hat off my coat, and smiled at him with open hands. Abner Shelley. Familiar. I watched as his face turned pale, and his expression was ugly, as if the fine porcelain was shattered. Abner Shelley's lips moved, but only a meaningless breath came out of his throat, helplessly, scaredly, but they didn't know what to say. He lifted his foot to approach me. Don't come here. I took a step back and put my hand on the door. He was pierced by my eyes. His face turned a little whiter, and he hesitated, but he still stopped. Abner Shelley. I interrupted him and said in a light, see you tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the West Playground. See you or leave you. This sentence was like the final blow, and Abner Shelley's face was like gold paper, and he almost lost his footing, as if he had lost his soul. He walked up to me, and tried to take my hand. Cora Milne. I don't. I quickly sat on the taxi. The driver starts the car. The moment I pass by, I smiled at him outside the car window. Abner Shelley. Don't lose her face. I'll be there. When Gladys Salome picked me up downstairs, I was blocking the 4th number of Abner Shelley. She came back from a workout downstairs in the evening, still sweating lightly. How's it going? Broke up. Gladys Salome snorted, and said no more. I obediently followed her into the room. Failed. Gladys Salome gave me a hand to pour water, and as if nothing had happened, she handed me the glass. I took it and looked up at her, and she didn't avoid my gaze. Guessed. She sneered and asked me why I was so idle. Abner Shelley kept changing cell phones to call and text me. Before I went to sleep, I blocked the last number he sent and just sent him a text back. 8 o'clock. No see or leave. Time flies. It's like 3 years in a flash. Gladys Salome's cell phone kept ringing during the meal, and she took a look at it and cut it off. I put down my chopsticks and looked at her with some confusion. Abner Shelley called, she said, her expression faint. He wants to talk to you. No need. The hands on the wall swayed. The hour hand pointed to 6 o'clock, and I got up and laughed. Let's talk about something. By the time I got to the playground, it was almost dark and there were a lot of people on the track, much more than usual. Threes and threes, walking, stretching their necks, as if looking for something. The lights under the rostrum are bright, like a stage specially prepared for us. I pulled my hat down and walked straight that way. People passing by were sharp-eyed, and some people saw that the clothes on my body were familiar, looked at them a few more times, and whispered to my companions. Searchlight-like eyes kept coming at me, accompanied by a steady stream of gossip. They surround me like flies, and it's annoying. Weren't you still angry that day? It's not like I'm here to apologize to Odelia Roy today. A voice as sharp as a crow suddenly sounded, and my identity was revealed in public. Those eyes were even more unscrupulous, centered on me, and gave way to a vacant space. I looked at the man who had spoken, one of the sisters that Odelia Roy brought that night. She crossed her hands, her face full of the ridicule of the victor in the face of the loser. I staggered my eyes and didn't speak. She stretched out her hand, and was about to push me again. I didn't hide, but halfway through, I suddenly reached out a hand in front of me and opened her hand. The girl was in pain. Her eyes widened and she was about to burst into a foul mouth, but she was silenced again. I looked through the two of them to Odelia Roy coming out of the crowd. Her cheeks were still a little swollen, but they were finally symmetrical. Step by step, only a few meters, but she walked hard and slowly. The surroundings fell silent. The protagonist took the stage, and the show finally began. Odelia Roy. When the little sister saw her appear, she hurriedly stood behind her, as if she had a support, and became angry again. Odelia Roy looked at me, but she no longer had the pride she used to have. She didn't dare look at Abner Shelley, who was standing in front of me, her eyes fixed on me, but the resentment in her eyes remained unabated. She straightened her back, her hand at her side clenched tightly. It's a shame. Not convinced. She wanted to reclaim her dignity from me. She wanted to use me to prove that her status could not be provoked. Unfortunately, wishful thinking fell through. I can imagine that she wanted to tear me to pieces, but now, she still had to knock out her teeth and swallow it in her stomach. There were more and more people around, and the whispers grew louder and louder after seeing that we were silent. I couldn't wait any longer, so I opened my mouth first. Aid. Before I could finish speaking, I heard Abner Shelley, who was standing in front of me, speak lightly. Odelia Roy. Odelia Roy's body shook almost imperceptibly, and then met my eyes, the resentment in them growing, but still under the threat of Abner Shelley. He spoke slowly and stiffly. Yes, I'm sorry. Odelia Roy's voice was not small, and she managed to make the sister behind her gasp, and the pig teammate screamed in a hurry. Odelia Roy, what are you talking about? Why apologize to her? She should apologize to you. As soon as these words were shouted, everyone on the field was quiet. Odelia Roy's face became even more ugly, and she whispered, "Don't say it. It's a pity that her sister is a fool." Why, Odelia Roy, it's her who obviously wants to apologize. Didn't you say that today I want her to kneel down and apologize to you? A sentence stirred up 1,000 waves. Yes, I bypassed Abner Shelley, who was in front of me, and stood in front of her. I'm here to apologize to you. I shouldn't have pushed you when you cut in line. So, I met her gaze. I've come to kneel down with you and apologize. The word kneeling was bitten very hard by me. The person behind me tried to take my hand, but I shook it off. I ignored him and just looked at Odelia Roy with a smile. The moon is as cool as water. After a long time, the man behind me spoke up, his tone as indifferent as that night, and he told me that he didn't care whose fault it was. Odelia Roy. The implication in the tone is too obvious. Odelia Roy's face turned pale, but his body trembled, his lips tightened, and little by little, his knees were bent. All eyes were on her alone. It weighed 1,000 pounds, a little bit, and bent her spine. But in a week, the roles of the two of us were reversed, and the person who lost her dignity became her. The play reaches its climax, but Odelia Roy is like an actor with poor acting skills, and she is reluctant to finish her role. But it doesn't matter. This does not prevent her from becoming a laughingstock from now on, and no one will pay for her series of outrageous behaviors. Her reliance has ceased to exist. I heard whispers in the crowd, flashing lights recording Odelia Roy's ugliness, and cold eyes and mockery descended on Odelia Roy. My mood suddenly brightened. Leaning over Odelia Roy's ear, I chuckled. I said it, "You're nothing without Abner Shelley." Summer insects chirped noisily in the trees, and all that remained in the forest was the chirping of cicadas and their breathing. The appearance of three people huddled together is particularly funny. Odelia Roy looked terrified, but still shouted, "I won't let you go." I ignored her anger and just looked down at her and smiled. The moment the fingers clamped her chin, her body shrank back uncontrollably. She was forced to look at me. "Let go of me." Odelia Roy's unfinished words disappeared into a crisp slap. This time it was symmetrical. The companion behind him gasped, his eyes widening. Odelia Roy's face turned to the side again, as if she had been blinded, and she had not come back to her senses for a long time. "You hit me, little slut, you were." I stomped on her leg. "Don't let me go. You can't do it. You're nothing without Abner Shelley." "Slut, you wait. Tomorrow, I'll wait." I waited for Abner Shelley, my boyfriend, to come and confront me. Abner Shelley followed me as I went to bed, walking all the way without saying a word. The sound of breathing is everywhere. Several times I wanted to speak and stopped, but finally fell silent. All the way downstairs to the dormitory, I suddenly turned around and looked at him. His eyes were a little wandering, but at the moment of confrontation, he seemed to grasp some life-saving straw. "Cora Milne, I'm sorry. I don't know." "Abner Shelley," I interrupted him with a loud voice, stretching out his hand. Under the light of the dim street lamp, the unhealthy bruises on his arms were still obvious. "Do you see clearly?" I met his gaze and called out to him softly, as before, "Abner Shelley, do you see clearly? It's been more than 20 days, and it's still there." Abner Shelley took a step back, his body unsteady, his gaze resting on the bruise, as if he had lost his soul, staring at it. People are like that. It is only when what they do involves themselves that they are able to perceive the pain in it. Everything Abner Shelley has ever done to me, by now, it will become a sharp weapon, and slash it out of his heart. Let him be in pain. Abner Shelley disappeared from me for 3 or 4 days before reappearing. After school at noon, I went to the cafeteria to line up to eat. It came early, and the queue at the popular window was less than half as usual, and I was in a good mood, and stood in line and waited. The number of people in front is gradually decreasing. A familiar figure appeared on the side of the line, Odelia Roy and her little sister. She spotted a position and wanted to repeat her old tricks as before, but she couldn't do it as before. Was pushed by someone? She was annoyed and angry, and just wanted to open her mouth to scold, but she was scolded first. What? Dare to cut in line? Shameless. Heh. What everyone is afraid of is her gangster boyfriend, and even Abner Shelley, who supports them behind their backs. Abner Shelley's family has money and power, so when Abner Shelley wasn't on her side, Odelia Roy was nothing. I staggered my gaze, didn't pay any more attention to her farce, and happily ate my meal, ready to find a seat to sit down. There were more people in the cafeteria, and I stood in the crowd, searching for it, and finally found a good spot and walked over with a bowl. It's exactly the same scene as that day. It's still only 4 or 5 steps away. When passing by a dining table, his hand was suddenly grabbed, and the bowl was a little unstable, but fortunately the rice was not spilled. I looked at the culprit who was holding me back, but it was Abner Shelley, who had been gone for a few days. He doesn't seem to have slept well. His eyes are dark and green, and his expression is sorrowful, but his appearance is really outstanding. But there is a kind of decadent beauty. I looked at him, but I didn't speak. Cora Milne. Abner Shelley cautiously called my name. I'm sorry. The look is obvious flattering. If I can't make up for what I've done to you, you can give it back to me, okay? Yet, I wanted to laugh. How? The hand holding my wrist suddenly exerted force, forcing the rice bowl in my hand to topple. The dark sauce and the meal, as the bowl tilted, all fell on Abner Shelley's body. The meal stuck to his hair, and the dark soup ran across his face, contrasting with the cold white skin, and fell on his white short sleeves, polluting a large area. The girl next to me screamed, and instantly made us the focus of the crowd again. Abner Shelley let go. When they looked at me, all they could see was me splashing Abner Shelley with the bowl. Someone gasped. Abner Shelley didn't care about the sights. His eyes were always on my face. His voice was hoarse, and his posture was about to fall into the dust. Cora Milne. Please, give it all back to me. Don't. It. The first time Abner Shelley begged for help, the corners of his eyes were a little red, and his eyes were full of begging. He used to say that I had broken Odelia Roy's face, and she was upset. Later, he broke Odelia Roy's face and trampled her into the dust. Now, he personally folded his face. He wanted to beg me for forgiveness. But Abner Shelley, things in this world can't be reported and reported. The cafeteria was noisy, and the sound of gossip and discussion surrounded me again. Abner Shelley was waiting for my answer. He was doomed to disappointment. Abner Shelley. The bowl in his hand was empty. I looked down and said softly, "It's a dish I've wanted to eat for a long time." He was stunned for a moment, and his face fell little by little. Abner Shelley said, one report after another. When his text came, I was watching the show with Gladys Salome, and sent a message with a new card that I don't know how many times I had changed. The agreed place was the first time he brought someone to block me. Gladys Salome looked at me, and I put my phone down and tossed it aside. Aren't you going? Not going. I leaned back on the couch. It's nothing more than watching him be abused, and it's getting dark, and I don't bother to go there. Gladys Salome was silent, and I folded my hands and looked at her lazily, and smiled. I used to think it was fun to be in a relationship with Abner Shelley. Then he appeared, and I suddenly realized that something more interesting had happened. Watch a person have an emotional breakdown. Watch him get carried away with guilt, seeing that he regretted not being at the beginning. He was in pain, isolated as a child. They said that my father was a murderer, hated me, and even threw stones at me. Obviously I didn't do anything. Gladys Salome is the illegitimate daughter of a large family, and her mother was tricked into being a mistress without knowing it. Children's disgust is more intuitive than that of adults. That's merciless evil. My murderer father killed my mother. The love he said became the shackles he gave to his lover, and finally became the murder weapon that took her life. 3 years ago, Gladys Salome asked me why I was so idle. I lowered my eyes and sighed. Maybe this is the greatness of love. But what is love? It's hideous possessiveness. Or is it a different kind of human nature? I do not know. Abner Shelley's video arrived in my email the next day. In the 10-minute video, he was surrounded in the middle, without resistance, silently enduring the violence of several people. Someone couldn't bear to start. His fists fell lightly, and he yelled at him again. He is like a madman, masochistic to make people hit harder. Harder. I watched the video with a blank face. Along with this video came a request to meet him. I ignored the 1,000-word confession, and I emailed him back asking where he was. He replied as usual, cautiously asking me where it was convenient, and he came to me. I gave the address of the cafe, and made an appointment for the afternoon. Abner Shelley appears as promised. He was a little haggard again, and his figure was a little thinner. His white short sleeves were a little empty, and there were bright bruises hanging from the corners of his mouth. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up and quickly dimmed. Cora Milne. Abner Shelley called me tentatively, cautiously, pitiful, like an abandoned stray dog. I answered. He was immediately a little happy, and there was no longer the previous arrogance between his eyebrows. I'm sorry, Cora Milne. Forgive me. Okay, I didn't know it was you. I don't know it's me. I put down the cup in my hand and interrupted him. Words of apology. Abner Shelley said it many times. Changed one calling card after another. Long and short confessional texts. He was scared, afraid of losing me. Abner Shelley. You never realize what you're doing wrong. He apologized to me because I was Cora Milne. It's the one he puts on the tip of his heart. What if I wasn't? If I'm nothing? I'm just an ordinary student. I just suffered such an unwarranted disaster inexplicably. Does he feel like he's wrong? He won't. What he did to me, it didn't matter to me at all. I never cared about the embarrassment and pain. When he was on the boy's side, from the first time we met, I knew we couldn't do it anymore. People who lack emotion never know how to love and be loved. And I was driven to finish this scene just because of interest. The emotional ups and downs of people are strange. At first, I was with Abner Shelley, and he was no different to me. Later, he suddenly changed, and called me to cry. And the moment my emotions collapsed, I suddenly noticed a strange emotion. I've never had such vivid emotions. Just as I could feel that Abner Shelley loved me, he could feel that I didn't really have deep feelings for him. I wanted to find that answer from him. The answer to love. In the end, it failed. Sure me, the moral bottom line cannot be crossed. Actually, it's only a little bit. I got up. My eyes fell on the bruises on the corners of his mouth, and I smiled. Abner Shelley, you know what? It's just a little bit. Actually, almost. I'm going to like you. It's a pity. Bullies never deserve it. Abner Shelley's face turned pale in an instant, and his body was shaky. Abner Shelley disappeared from me again. He was mentioned again by Gladys Salome. The background sound of the video on the phone is noisy. Gladys Salome hands the phone to me. Abner Shelley came to me before. He asked me how I could get you to forgive him. What did you say? I said. Gladys Salome took her cigarette, but I stopped her, who submissively put it down. You don't forgive a bully. I smiled non-committally. Gladys Salome motioned for me to look at the video with her eyes. I don't know if he understands me. I reopened play. The cacophony of the background sound of the video came again, and the picture was not clear. There are many people in the video, and the most prominent of them is a thin figure, with his head hanging and apologizing in a low voice. The camera didn't catch the person across from him, but the angry voice of the man outside the frame could be heard. Apologize now. Did it work? The voice poured out his grievances and pains. In the end, he yelled as if angry. You still want to forgive? You kneel down and apologize to me, and I'll forgive you. Abner Shelley's form froze, and the two words in the sentence pierced his heart with unmistakable accuracy. The atmosphere was silent for a moment. The next second, he bent his knee steadily towards the man. The video came to an abrupt end. I heard that he went to the person he had bullied before and begged for forgiveness. This video went viral in the school post bar. I read it with a laugh, handing the phone back to Gladys Salome. Do you know why Abner Shelley likes me so much? Gladys Salome looked at me and was silent. The original family is too cold. and his parents don't love him. Behind the glamour is a cold estrangement. In his childhood, there was only an empty home, and parents who never talked to him much. He had no one to talk to. All his words were stuck in his throat and he couldn't speak. Only his grandfather is the only one who loves him. The pain in the heart of losing such a person is immeasurable. When I met later, I was by my grandfather's side when he died. He opened the softest part of his heart to me. After losing the person he loved the most, I became his lifesaver. I was kind to him, and no matter what he said, I coaxed him in a gentle tone. He loves me. He gave Odelia Roy and the likes of him an umbrella because he didn't care. He doesn't care about anyone's life or death except the people he cares about, including Odelia Roy. Cold and ruthless. But this is the real him. The wounds of the family of origin are difficult to heal. He still grew up to be like this after all. It's not like Abner Shelley hasn't looked for me, the most violent one. It rained at night, he drank too much, and others couldn't stop him. So he called me. The voice on the other end of the phone was hoarse, even with a faint cry. He called my name over and over again. Cora Milne, Cora Milne. I really know it's wrong. I apologized to each of them, and I begged them to forgive me. Please, please, Cora Milne, don't let me. Reading and reading. It was silent again. Someone in the background was persuading him to drink less. Someone snatched his phone, and his tone was a little angry. Sister, I'll beg you. You can say a good word to Abner Shelley. He will really die if you drink him again. I was silent for a moment. Give him the phone. Cora Milne. Abner Shelley's tone was out of shape. Cora Milne, please, don't leave me behind. I was wrong. I knew I was wrong. Don't you want me? Cora Milne. His grandfather died 2 years ago. Abner Shelley called in the middle of the night, also hoarse, and asked me, will you be with me? Cora Milne. I softened my voice to comfort him and coax him. I said, I'll be with you. It's still him now. Begged me not to go with tears. Please don't want him. The night is like ink. I looked out the window, and my voice was flat. Abner Shelley. Don't be cheap. Later, Gladys Salome said that he had been standing downstairs all night that night, and it was raining in the middle of the night, and he was taken to the hospital early in the morning. I hear jokes and forget them. I have known for a long time that Abner Shelley was arrogant, proud, delicate on the outside, but empty on the inside. None of this matters. I had hoped that he would be my salvation, but he wasn't. He is not the moon. The misfortune of his family of origin is not a reason for him to become an accomplice to the bully. Some things are unforgivable. The end.